Markets are moving fast, and the forces behind them are anything but simple. From shifts in U.S. monetary leadership to sudden swings in currencies, commodities, and global trade dynamics, investors are being asked to interpret a lot of noise in a short amount of time. To help make sense of what's driving recent volatility and what it could mean for Canada's economic outlook, we're joined by Brendan Caldwell, Director of Caldwell Securities Limited. Brendan, thank you so much for the time today.
Theresa, it's always great to be here. Thank you.
Now, Brendan, what do you think about President Trump's Fed chair pick, Kevin Warsh?
Well, I don't know. Close to 800 something years ago, the nearest thing that England had to an absolute monarch at that point was King Henry II. And he'd really had it with the Archbishop of Canterbury. So when the time came to appoint a new one, he appointed his good buddy Thomas Becket, thinking that, well, if I got my friend there, it's all going to go smoothly. And there was never a rockier ride in the history of, at least to that point, of England between the crown and the church. So just appointing your friends doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have a smooth ride of it. So Kevin Warsh, people have said things on both sides, but on paper at least, he's very qualified, and in reality, he's very qualified. He was the youngest Fed governor in history, appointed 20 years ago at the age of 35. And then was instrumental with Ben Bernanke's trying to negotiate the way through the financial crisis of 2008. He was kind of Bernanke's go-to guy for solving a lot of the New York problems. And then he's been a professor at Stanford. He's a qualified individual. All this is leading up to a but. What the president really wants is lower rates, more expansive monetary policy. He wants the punch bowl to stay on the table till dawn. He does not want it ever pulled away. But if you read Kevin Warsh's, what he had said over the years, coming out of the 2008 financial crisis and other times, he's been what could be reasonably described as hawkish, not very expansive in his view of the Fed's role and in stimulating the economy either by cutting rates or expanding its balance sheet. So was probably for this reason that the U.S. dollar had something of a rally on Friday in wake of this announcement, because if anything, that the market's taking from this that maybe there'll be a cooler head in the Federal Reserve office, and maybe even a stronger opponent to Mr. Trump than Chairman Powell has been. So we shall see. Because keep in mind, Chairman Powell, for whom the president has had in recent months nothing but contempt, even to the point of sicking his Justice Department on him, pressing criminal charges potentially, was a Trump appointee back in the day. So you never know.
And would you say that this is the reason or part of the reason why precious metals have plummeted?
Yeah, I think that was part of it. I think the idea, I think precious metals have been lagging for a while. You could have bought gold, say, 15 years ago and seen it done very little, or just work its way up, through $1,000, through $2,000 an ounce, even as governments, particularly here and in the United States, have been printing money like it's the Weimar Republic. They've just been. I mean, it would bring tears to the eyes of a 1970s South American dictator, just the sheer amount of money that's been printed. But it has not had, until relatively recently, negative economic effects. And the price of gold, and the precious metals, silver included, has been relatively measured in its increase until lately. The idea that the president would abandon even the pretext of a strong U.S. dollar policy in favor of cutting rates and stimulating the economy, that really got gold and silver going. But so the idea that Kevin Warsh might actually not restore but retain some sanity in the U.S. central bank, I think had a bit of a pullback. Well, caused a bit of a pullback in both metals. But I do think the trend is there, and I do think the trend will continue to be higher. So if one had a long-term negative view on government currencies, on the U.S. dollar, I don't think gold is a bad place to be, and I think even around here, gold and silver may actually be very good buying opportunities.
Now, over the past week, our Canadian dollar has actually been higher. Why would that be? What's going on?
Well, it is a little perplexing, isn't it, considering all that the US has thrown at us, that our dollar continues to be higher. Well, our central bank has held rates steady rather than cutting them. Um, but that might be one reason. The idea that the US dollar might be going to free fall, that might be another reason. Although there was a bit of a pullback in the Canadian dollar both Friday and today, it's still higher than it was, say, at the beginning of the year. Um, Canada is, I think maybe the big reason there is Canada is the only normal petrocurrency on the face of the earth. That is the only reasonable country of any magnitude that has its currency at least somewhat dependent on the price of oil. And the price of oil has been strong.
And in your opinion, what is happening with geopolitical and trade tensions? It seems like it's hard to get away from trade talk right now.
Well, there's so many factors in play, both foreign and domestic. I'm not surprised, but a little disappointed that the US Supreme Court has not come down with some sort of ruling on whether the Trump tariffs, which are made up, just made up out of thin air. I mean, they're not the one that he's nominally putting on Bombardier jets. I mean, at least with the tariffs earlier this year, he manufactured an immigration and fentanyl crisis. Like hordes of fentanyl coming over the Canadian border, hordes of illegal immigrants coming down from Manitoba. He at least manufactured a crisis. With this Bombardier thing, he's not even bothering to try. So the US Supreme Court really does need to rule on that. And then in terms of geopolitical, I mean, the beginning of the year, we saw the president of Venezuela go to bed one night in his presidential palace and wake up the next morning on a USS aircraft, a US aircraft carrier. So that will put a bit of a boost in the price of oil, Venezuela being one of the biggest oil producers in the world, notwithstanding its crippled and dilapidated economic state. And then we've got Iran going on, and from the tensions that are heating up over the last little bit, perhaps even as we're airing, something goes down in Iran, because it does seem that the U.S. is moving closer and closer to getting engaged there. So with the big international oil producers and being the subject of U.S. incursions of one sort or another, and trade being very much up in the air, yeah, there's going to continue to be a lot of volatility.
And what do you think this means, the oil volatility? What do you think it means for the Canadian economy?
Well, if we have the sense to take advantage of it, I mean, I do think over the next X number of years, there will be a transition away from fossil fuels to something else or better. I think we're holding the Chinese at bay with their electric cars, at least in part, so the Western world can catch up. But one way or the other, I think it will move away from fossil fuels. So I think if Canada wants to establish itself for whatever comes next, it needs to get the last puff, perhaps it can, out of the fossil fuels business. So we are, as I say, the world's only normal petrocurrency. We make, relatively speaking, clean energy with a minimum of environmental destruction compared to others. I think we should take advantage of that and do the best we can with that while the opportunity still exists.